Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today we'll be leading a PAW client training, which is going to be focused on the modeler role. This is the second of 3 free trainings that QueBIT is offering. Our third and final PAW training is going to be on Tuesday, May 19th. And for that, we will focus on the admin role and discuss best practices for building out admin books as well as PAW security. So we encourage all of you to follow us along in our free PAW training series. To sign up for that, please visit us at QueBIT.com/events. I am your presenter today. My name is Maria Lack. I'm the manager of strategic operations, training, and support. I'm based in sunny San Diego, and I'm joined on the call with Steve Swartz, who is the Planning Analytics Consultant. Steve is joining us from Austin, Texas, and will be monitoring for all of your questions. We work for QueBIT Consulting. QueBIT is headquartered in New York, but has consultants all across the United States from coast to coast. We help companies succeed by optimizing their planning and analysis processes. This includes financial planning and analysis, or FP&A, operational planning, and increasingly integrated planning across functions. We pride ourselves on understanding planning and analysis from a business and finance point of view, but also we understand the technology deeply. Our history with IBM Planning Analytics, which is still powered by TM1, goes back to the early 1990s. And we're very excited about how IBM is investing in it. We're especially excited about these new possibilities for our clients with Planning Analytics Workspace, otherwise known as PAW. So the agenda for today is to cover creating new objects in Planning Analytics, such as elements, dimensions, and cubes. And then we're going to talk about how we do TI processes and rules in PAW, along with creating a pick list for your users. So we'll be sure to leave some time at the end for a little Q&A as well. Here's a few housekeeping notes before we get started. As I mentioned, today's training is the first of 3 free online trainings with IBM Planning Analytics. If you're interested in PAW, but your organization doesn't have PAW yet, I do want to tell you about a very special offer. IBM is offering a free trial to you all of PAW. So if you would like, you can access this free trial by going to our website. It's QueBIT.com/IBMPA. We will be recording this webinar and emailing you all a link afterwards. Feel free to forward this and share with anybody who might be interested in seeing this content. Or you can visit our online video catalog where you'll find dozens of other helpful past webinars. If you missed our first webinar in this training series, the one that we focused on end user dashboards and creating the user experience design, then we have posted it on our QueBIT YouTube channel. So be sure to check that out as well. With today's training, we do have a couple of assumptions. So we assume that you are experienced with building user interfaces and dashboards within PAW. So again, that was the content that we covered in the very first training. We are assuming that you are familiar with Planning Analytics as a developer. So you're familiar with terms such as cubes, dimensions, attributes, elements, that sort of thing. And we're also assuming that we have been granted the proper PAW and TM1 security access. With that, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the, quote, modeler role in TM1's Planning Analytics Workspace. So the modeler role really focuses on the ability for somebody to create and share books and views within PAW. This person would also have the ability to create, edit, and delete TM1 objects, but so long as they're granted that permission on the back end in TM1 Planning Analytics. So for today, we're going to assume that we have been granted the proper PA security permissions to do everything that we're going to do today, such as add, edit, and delete cubes, attributes, rules, and TI. But just know that if you are granted a modeler role in PAW, all of that security still resides behind the scenes in Planning Analytics TM1. So let's talk about that infrastructure a little bit. In the last class, we were focusing on the end users. And as we know, the end users can access TM1 Planning Analytics through two main ways. One is PAW, and the other is Planning Analytics for Excel, now called PAW. So if you were going to be doing reporting, you would be working in Excel, that would be PAW. If you were working on the web through a browser, that would be PAW. It's all tied back into the PAW server, which of course ties into the TM1 server. So TM1 is still what's driving all the data. But for today's class, we wanted to focus on the modeler role in PAW, which kind of loosely translates to a TM1 power user, perhaps a TM1 admin, or maybe it's somebody who's taken the IBM developers class that QueBIT offers. So these are people that are going to want to do more architecture within your model and designing your model. These people can interact with TM1 objects in two ways. So the first is historically what everyone has been using, which is Architect. And the second is PAW. So in today's class, we're going to be focusing on the PAW. We also wanted to give you a real life business scenario to kind of go through this training with. And for that, we're going to be focusing on our capital expenditures planning model that we've built out. We will continue using the dashboard that we built in our first class. And for this class, our business requirements will be that we need to create some TM1 objects, and then we're going to edit some attributes. We're going to add an alternate hierarchy. We're going to use buttons that call a TI process, and then we're going to add a pick list using rules. So again, the assumptions are that you're already familiar with these concepts. We're not going to go too deep into, you know, what is a rule and what is a process and that sort of thing. But we're also assuming that, again, you would have this privilege already granted to you through your TM1 security. All right, so I'm going to jump into the demo environment that I have. Now with this demo environment, I'm going to just pull open PAW and log in. So this might be familiar to you. We have our CapEx demo that we built out in our last training. If you didn't attend our last training, we built out this welcome page, and then we have these buttons which then can jump you to different pages. For example, if I click on asset input, we created an asset input page where our end users needed to come in and enter in these data points into an asset input cube. I can click on my logo that we built out to jump me back to my welcome page. We had a drivers page, which pulled from a PAW report. This is a pre-built Planning Analytics for Excel report that we pulled into PAW dashboard. And then we created a management dashboard, which had a high-level overview of, you know, conditional formatted numbers. We had charts and graphs, that sort of thing. So we built all this out in the last training for our end users, but now as a modeler, we're going to open up our data tree, and you notice that I can drill down into more things than the analyst role would see. So as a PAW modeler, I can see things such as dimensions, processes, chores, control objects, as well as cubes and applications. Of course, all this is granted behind the scenes in TM1 security. So if I was blocked from seeing any of this, then I wouldn't be able to see it here. But for this example, we have everything that we need. So let's get started. First, I'm going to go into edit mode. So I have to click on my blue pencil. This means that now I can start editing my dashboard. I can start dragging from my data source tree onto my workspace. And I can also add new sheets. So I'm going to add a new sheet. These are the kind of pre-built select a template to get started on your new sheet. I prefer to develop in freeform because this just means I have complete control on the size and the place of where I'm putting my objects, but feel free to explore with the many templates that are pre-built depending on how you want your page to look. You can think of these as kind of like templates in Microsoft PowerPoint, where you can kind of have something to get started with rather than building from scratch. So I have a new sheet that I just opened up here. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is how do you add elements in PAW. So in our last class, we had asset types dimension that we were working with. One of the things you can do is you can just click and drag and drop it onto your workspace. And you notice that I have different elements already existing in my dimension. And what I can do is I can add new elements. So for example, if I wanted to add, I have a quick menu bar on the left-hand side, and I can click the plus sign. From here, I can start editing in my new member names. So members is now the term that is the go forward new name for elements. So you're going to hear those two interchangeably as we all get, used to the new lingo that IBM has put out. So these are members. So I can add things, like let's say I wanted to add hardware. And you notice that I can change from the drop down, whether it's numeric, consolidated, string, that sort of thing. If I wanted to, I can click enter key, and then I can continue on adding more different types of members. And then they would be in edit mode and marked green until I hit the commit key. So let's say that I had another one and another one, and I'm just hitting enter. It's moving from line to line. So until they are committed, they're marked in green and they're still considered editable. So I could go back and highlight and change one of these. So I'm going to commit, and you notice that it adds it into my list of elements here. Now, if I highlight one of my elements, then I enable the side panel again, and you have different options. So one of the things is we could delete an element from a parent, from a hierarchy, or from the dimension in total. Parent and hierarchy are not enabled because this specific member is not part of a hierarchy or a consolidated element yet. If they were, that would be an option. Or you could say from dimension. You can also move the order of the element. So you can move it up, down. You can kind of rearrange the order here. Now this is different than the subset editor, but if you wanted to just get a start on where this member lies in the order of the dimension, you can do that here. You can also cut, you can paste, and you can copy and duplicate members. So you can rather quickly get started on your dimension order from this handy menu. Okay, and with that, that is just as simple as it is to enter in members manually. You also have the option to upload, if you wanted to, into a new dimension. Of course, this is usually in real life ran by a process, but you do have that option as well. Now let's go on to creating a new dimension. So I'm going to just add a new sheet just so that we can start with a clean slate. And for this, it's as simple as coming over to your pane. You can right click and you can create dimensions. So I'm just right clicking on the word dimensions and I'm creating dimensions. This pop-up box will give you the option of where you're going to put the new dimension. So it's listing my TM1 instances that are running. I'm working right now within my CapEx instance, so I'm going to keep it there. But if I had other instances up and running, they would show here. And of course, that's based on my TM1 security, right? So I have access to this other TM1 instance. Maybe there's another one running that I don't have access to, that I don't even know about, that exists behind the scenes. So let's keep it in CapEx. And my new dimension name, let's create a department. And create. So now you have a little pop-up that says it was created successfully. That pop-up does fade quickly, but you notice that it is kind of nice. You see it on the left-hand side under my dimensions, it's alphabetical. And you also notice that a new window pops up in my workspace. It automatically chooses the instance that I had selected. It names my dimension, and then it will create the first hierarchy. So from here, again, you can easily pivot if you needed to, different instances. Here's all my dimensions, as well as any future hierarchies that I would build out. So this is the dimension editor screen. We also have the familiar side menu bar and a couple of new options because this is a new dimension. So again, we can enter new members manually. You could browse for a file, or let's say this is a time dimension. We could get a jump start on creating time if we chose that option. But for this, we're just going to add a couple members manually. I'm just going to click on this. And again, just to kind of speed up the demo, I'm going to enter in a couple of batched members here and commit them. And that's as easy as it is to create a new dimension. But let's say that we needed to add some attributes now on these new members that we added into our department's dimension. Within the same window, it's nice because you can switch to this little tag. And if I hover my mouse, you can say switch to member attribute mode. This will now put you in member attributes. And we can go ahead and click the plus to create a new attribute. So from here, I'm just going to call it number name and choose alias. I could also choose text or number, just like an architect. So from here, I'm just going to populate my attributes. And I'm just clicking in here and typing just as quick as that. And clicking enter to move on to the next one. So this is all committed and written back to your data file folder behind the scenes. If you wanted to, up at your top blue bar, you can click and you get a pop-up menu. So from here is where you can see, you can hover your mouse and it'll tell you what these little symbols mean. This one is refresh. This is to put it down into your collections. Collections is a PAW feature where you can kind of save this pop-up box for future use. You could duplicate the box. So you notice that it's now duplicated. And then you can also delete. And deleting, again, is not deleting this dimension. Deleting is going to remove this box from my workspace area. So you can rest assured that when you click this, it simply takes away the box, not the dimension, not the attribute. And that's how we create the dimension and edit the attributes. So now let's go ahead and create a new cube. So if I go up to my cubes on my left-hand data source tree, I can again right-click and create cube. This again gives a pop-up box. You can choose what instance you want, and let's create a new cube. I'm just going to call it financial reporting. From there, you have a list of available dimensions that we can use. I'm just going to randomly choose some. You know, this is just a demo, so it doesn't really have to be exact. There is my new department's dimension in the list, which is great. And then I'm going to just pick some other ones here and move it over to make the selection using the arrows. If I wanted to take one out at this point, I still can using the arrows. I can also click on any one of these dimensions and change the order. So this is how you are setting up your dimension order for your new cube in PAW. Simply click Create, and then you notice I've got a little pop-up that quickly comes up on the left-hand side and quickly fades to say, yes, you created a new cube. You notice it's already here on my left-hand data source tree. And we now have a new working window that popped up, which is my cube viewer in the PAW dashboard. So this cube viewer has kind of the same setup as your regular cubes would. We have a list of title elements. We have what's on our columns and our rows. We can start pivoting things around if we wanted to. Let's say I wanted to put periods on my columns. Let's say I wanted accounts on my rows. Now we don't have data yet loaded into this cube, but we could run our process or create a process to then load data down the road. So now we've got this. I can come up to my box, and you notice I have a different menu because it's changed based off of the item that's selected. So this PAW object is similar to a cube viewer. So basically, this is a smart box that now has options that pop up according to what is in this view. All right. So you have things like refresh. We have suppress our zeros. We have swap columns and rows. You could save this view. Let's say I want to save the view as. Now you can go into here and I can save it under different folders. Perhaps I make it a shared view for my users, that sort of thing. You can mark this down into collections. So if I click collect, this will move it over to my collections menu bar on the right-hand side, and I can choose it for future use. So here you see I have other things that I have collected. Notice its title is based off of the workbook that I'm in. And you can also drag and drop onto your workspace other collections that you have. Here's an image that I had, and I can start playing around with things. Here's a chart that I had. Oops, I didn't have access to this, so it threw an error. So notice that because I'm a modeler in PAW, and even if I have access to cubes and creating, editing, deleting elements and dimensions, it doesn't guarantee that I can see everything because this is based off of my TM1 permissions. So here I get an error. I'm not allowed to see this. So I'm going to just go up and delete this from my workspace. Okay, so that's collections. And then of course you can duplicate, delete, you could edit the title. You could change this into a visualization based off of whatever makes sense. I don't have data, so I'm not going to do that. Okay, so this is how you can quickly create a cube. And from that now, let's show you one more thing, and that's going to be what's going on behind the scenes. So we've seen us, add elements, add a dimension, we created a cube. So let's go back out to our architect, and I'm just going to double click and log in real quickly. And so now I'm in my trusty architect, and I do see, yep, there's my financial reporting cube. And within it, I see my the same dimension order that I had created behind the scenes in PAW. I notice that I do have my departments dimension. Here are my test elements and also my alias. So I toggled that on and all the attributes look great. And then I can go into my asset types and I can see that I have, let me just show all of my assets that I was adding as individual elements by hand. So you can see that as you're doing things in PAW, it is absolutely writing back in real time to Architect. So there's no lag between the two tools. All right. One more thing that we want to talk about is how do we add hierarchies? So alternate hierarchies are a way to take an existing dimension and have an attribute that we want to then be able to search upon and use as a hierarchy. So let's go ahead in our example. I'm going to take my products. I'm just clicking and dragging onto my workspace. So I have a pop-up dimension editor. This should be familiar because this is exactly what we were just working within. So this is an existing one. It's for products. And I'm going to turn on to view my attributes. You notice that I've populated here just a color attribute. Let's say that your management wanted to be able to, you know, switch out your graph so that you could start drilling on color, or you wanted to choose a visualization based off of color. And color is an attribute. So in your Architect, you know, we wouldn't be able to kind of create this as its own hierarchy previously, but you can in PAW. So in order to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first show you. There's no hidden tricks up my sleeve. You can notice the little image, which is the blue kind of like triangle that stands for a hierarchy. You notice that we have just the generic hierarchy that's always created upon creating the dimension. It's in the same name as the dimension. So products is a hierarchy that was created when the product dimension was first created. And then we have leaves. So somebody else added a hierarchy called leaves. And now we want one on color. So in order to do that, I open up the dimension under my workspace. I'm going to toggle to see my attributes. I'm going to highlight my attributes by choosing the column header, color. And then you just simply right-click, create hierarchy. So this gives me a pop-up that says, are you sure you want to create a new one? Yes. So this is going to now, behind the scenes, show me that I've got all of my list of products now according to color. And we see on the left-hand side that we now have a color hierarchy listed that's available for our users to use in all of their dashboards, as long as they have the permission to see the specific dimension. All right, so I know that we have, you know, kind of done the behind the scenes things. Everything is manual as far as what we've done to this point in time. But I want to give you a new real life business use case. So remember in our first training, we had created this asset input page where users came in and we would manually enter in all the different fields that are needed. And this would get loaded into our asset input cubes. And from there, we want to make sure that it gets pushed to our CapEx summary cube, and then therefore seen in all of our CapEx dashboard charts, graphs, visualizations. So in order to do this, let's take a look at this process that I've created here. I'm going to just roll this up, this dimensions, and expand out my processes. I happen to have already had the process written. I'm going to click and drag it onto my workspace. And one of the things here is it's already pre-written. I'm not going to go into how to build a process from scratch because that could take us all day depending on everyone's familiarity with coding and syntax, but I wanted to show you the process editing window in PAW and, in my opinion, how great it is compared to editing the process in Architect. So you notice at first that we get a new page here, and I can just click and expand out this window to make it a little bit bigger. Up at the top, it's the same familiar look and feel. I can toggle between instances as well as other processes that I've written. I have two kind of sub menu bars here. So the first is data source. You notice that this is my data source tab that it lies on. I can then toggle to parameters and see if I created any parameters. This process does have a parameter. And if you needed to add any more, you can use the side menu then to add a parameter, or you can highlight what you do have and click delete, or perhaps move in a different order for the prompt that a user would get when they run this process. And then I can click over to script. So script is kind of your new advanced tab, as you would see in the old TI process editor. So script, you notice now I've got this great new page. And at first glance, we notice that all the lines are numbered for us. That's great. We notice that we have colors, and these colors are done automatically for us. We don't have to go in and color code anything. And I can scroll down, and we notice that instead of having in the old Architect Advanced tab, the sub-tabs of Prologue, Metadata, Data, and Epilogue, we notice that they're all just kind of chained together on this one page. So I'm just scrolling down the entire page. We still do have hyperlinks as this sub-menu where I can go and click on, and then it jumps me to the section within my work area. So these are more hyperlinks now. They're not necessarily individual tabs. So I mentioned that, you know, we have this new kind of style to the layout of writing a TI process. And it's really great because immediately, if you had created an error, let's say that I mistakenly, you know, changed the TI code and it errors, it highlights it in red. And we have a little red X specifically next to the line number. And you notice that as I hover my mouse, it gives me, in my opinion, this is not the clearest of error messages, but it does at least tell you exactly where and what position this error is thrown. So at least at first glance, I can understand that there is an error, right? So another thing I can do is I can, you know, also use, let's say I just took off my semicolon, so I see other errors here because it doesn't understand anymore, you know, the code. I can go up to validate. If I click validate, this gives me a little bit more of a useful error message. So here we see error on the prologue, line 33, syntax error, we're missing a semicolon. Okay, that's a lot more helpful, so that's good. I love that validate button. So we have this as our general layout, and if I wanted to just add a comment, you know, let's say I do my pound sign, and you notice that it just immediately starts in the green font. So green is comments, pink is functions, we have blue is variables, black text is just your generic, and we have red as individual string and element names. So immediately as I'm just scrolling through here, it's just much easier to read. Another thing that you can do is you can change your font. So if I highlight, I can highlight a section or all of it if I wanted to. I can go over to my 3 ellipses on the right-hand side. And you notice I could enable line wrapping, and I could change my font. So here's where I could just bump it up or down if I wanted to. You know, you just change it, change the font style if you don't like it, that sort of stuff. Another thing you notice over here is displaying the shortcut keys. Shortcut keys are an awesome new feature that IBM has built into PAW. And these are pretty much following your standard shortcut keys if you're familiar with, Microsoft Office products, where you can do Control A will select everything, Control Z, Control Y to do, an undo, redo change. You have your directional navigational shortcuts. It's the same as any other keyboard shortcuts that you're familiar with. And that's really just a time-saving feature. I love this functionality of these shortcut keys. But I wanted to show you my favorite shortcut key, and that's this first one. It's the Control Space combination. You notice that the description says text completion hints. Well, this is to help me when I'm doing my coding from hand. So let's put that to use. First, I'm going to go into my insert process function. And we notice that this has a list of function categories for me at my fingertips. So depending on what I want to do, I can go into the category. I'm just going to randomly choose one here. So let's just go into attribute, and here's a good one, ATTRN. You notice that at first glance, this will give you a little description that's very helpful. So no longer do you have to go out into the IBM Knowledge Center reference guide to look at what ATTRN is. You can just simply come into this shortcut function key and then click on this, and it adds it to your process. And that was where my mouse happened to be, by the way. So be careful when you're adding this where your mouse is actually located. So you notice that it immediately threw an error, and it's going to tell me, hey, you inserted this function, but you now need to replace the little parameters with the specific attribute, member name, and dimension name. You notice that it gives you the line number. This is line 36, and then the specific number within the characters, 31, 20, and 17. Okay, but let's use this combination of control space now. So my mouse is in the proper position. It comes right before the dimension name. So if I clicked on my keyboard control space, I get a wonderful pop-up with all the different meaningful things that I could possibly enter into this parameter field. And you notice that they have a little icon. So if I'm quickly looking for something, I can see the dimension is the little arrows. That's the same icon that's used in the list on the left-hand side. So they're using nice standard icons for things. F is a function. And what you can do is you can then start typing. So let's say that I know what dimension I want. I just typed the P, and it filtered that list automatically. So I'm going to just choose periods here. And then it moves my mouse to the next one. So it inserted according to the syntax. So it uses the single quotes for me. It inserted the comma for me, and it moved it to the next one. So now I'm just going to quickly choose control space again and get a new filtered list of parameters that make sense for this field. So here you see, again, based off of, I have consolidated elements with a little sigma sign. That's kind of universal left over from Architect. It's the same in PAW. I have a little round symbol for the element member. I'm just going to randomly pick one here. And then again, I'm in proper place for the next field, which is attribute. I'm pressing control space again. And again, I can see attribute names. I could insert functions. And as I scroll down, I can pick anything that would make sense. So I'm just going to choose an attribute that I'm familiar with here. And it coded everything for me. So it inserted the function and then gave me a great pick list. And then from there, I could start typing to further filter down. All right. So I love this quick function category to start using with coding in case those are on the call or like me, where I can't remember, you know, the exact syntax of every single function. And I also love the fact that the control space will kind of fill in and filter a list for me. One thing that you can also do, and I just want to show you this, is it is smart enough to pick up on user-defined variables. So here you see I have a user-defined variable. I created this. It's vTargetCube. You notice it's up here at the top. This is not something that's, you know, native to anywhere outside of this process. So I'm going to just delete it. And I'm going to, again, click Control Space. And you notice that it pulls up a new list. I've got cubes, I've got functions, I've got little V's then for user-defined variables. So this is, let me see, what did I just delete here? Here's a V, so D asset, D measure. And if I go down, I can do the target cube. So that was the one that I just had deleted. It's a user-defined variable. So the control space can not only pick up existing cubes and dimensions and elements, but it can also be smart and pick up your user-defined variables that you've previously created in this TI process. All right, so if I wanted to run this process now that I've kind of stepped you through the interface, if we wanted to run a process, you know, as a modeler who has access to this process, of course, based off of your TM1 permissions, I can go to right-click and I can run the process. But in reality, PAW is a user experience. It is a dashboard. So coming over to your processes, right-clicking and running the process, that's for Architect. So that's the way that you did things in Architect. And really, that's not what PAW is all about. PAW is an end-user dashboarding tool. So the best practice to running processes in PAW is to use buttons. So let's go back to our real-life user case here with our asset input. And let's say that we had somebody who is entering all in their data. And wouldn't it be nice if they could just click a button which calls the process that we were just looking at? Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to come up to my dashboard and click on button, and I'm just dragging it where I want. So this is good. I'm just dragging in a new button. Then I can go over to my properties pane, and I can start editing all the different styles. So for example, general style, I can choose the look and feel of the button. It's really nice that it changes on demand, so I can kind of see it changing as I pick the different fill or border color. I can go into the text. So instead of saying button, let's just generically say run process. That's good. And you can also edit the text. So let's say I wanted to bold this and I want to match the other button. So I'm going to use the font style 24. And finally, you can choose the target. So in the last training class, we talked about navigating to destinations, meaning you could choose a button and you click on it and it's going to jump you to another location. Well, here we want to choose run process. And it just steps you through exactly what you need to do. So the user interface is very helpful for creating these buttons. Notice here I can choose the TM1 instance that I wanted to work with. So here I'm just going to choose CapEx, and it'll pull the list of processes that I have to choose from, again, based off of my access. So I can go ahead and set the parameters. So this is already set up for me, but if I wanted to change this, I could change it according to perhaps there is a manual list that I wanted to create, or perhaps use the dimension list. I can optionally refresh after execution, and let's also do something fun. Let's run the process, but then let's also jump to another location. So after a user enters the data, they're going to come in, click run the process, and then they're going to want to see the changes. Well, the changes all happen on the dashboard. So let's go ahead and choose to navigate to a location in this specific book, and let's choose the dashboard tab. So I would hope that after creating this new button, I can go ahead and I can enter my data and click the button. It's going to push the data from my input cube into my summary cube, which then flows through my dashboard. So let's go ahead and test this. You notice that I got out of my pencil mode. This is edit mode. So now I'm just as a user going to test this. I'm just going to choose this next line item. So we're in CapEx. Let's hypothetically say we bought a new office building. It's in Austin. It's over by Steve, who's on the call with us. And let's just enter in the specifics here. Let's say we got a great deal. Building only cost us that much. Okay, great. So we entered in all of our data. Now we just need to go in and we're going to click the button. So I'm running the process. It's going to prompt me. This is the prompt where I could change it. This prompt is fine for this use case, but you notice if I had other parameters here, it would be listed as well. Click OK. So now it jumped me to my dashboard page, as well as push that information into my summary cube, which flowed through my views here. So I noticed that all my views changed. That looks great. I also noticed my conditional formatting works. So it went from red, meaning nothing was inputted, to yellow, as well as updated my total assets. So everything seems to be working right for that button and for my end users. So that's the best way that you would set up running a process in PAW. Gone are the days of just right-clicking and running the process. Although you can, it is best practice to put it into a worksheet like this, which is in a book. And then, of course, you can apply security to the book and limit those who are coming in as well. Just an added layer of security. Because, of course, all of this is still sitting on top of the TM1 security, which is granted or denied with processes. All right. So now that we have our button all set up and we've edited a TI process, there's one more thing I wanted to talk to everybody about, and that is rules. So I'm going to go back into edit mode. I'm going to click on new sheet, add a freeform, and we have now rules. So in our asset input cube, it was kind of tedious that I had to manually enter property, plant, and equipment here for PPE asset type. That leaves a lot of room for error with my users. Perhaps there's misspellings or somebody calls it property, you know, that's not an element name. So wouldn't it be nice to create a pick list for my users where they can come in here, have a pick list drop down, makes it much more efficient. So let's do that using rules. I'm going to go over into my cubes on the left-hand side, and I'm going to just right-click on my CapEx input. This is where all that data was residing, and I'm going to edit my pick list cube. So you notice that immediately I got two different views. I have my rules open on the left-hand side, and then I have a pick list cube on the right-hand side. You can technically do this behind the scenes in this cube. It's a control cube, but I wanted to show you rules. So I'm going to quickly write out the rule for this. So I don't want to go into how to write rules. That's, you know, again, we could take all day talking about rules and feeders and that sort of stuff. So I have the rule already written out. I'm just copying and pasting in here. Notice when I copied and pasted, it immediately has color-coded everything for me. It put up the line numbers. You know, it's a similar user interface for the TI processes, which is really nice. I come up to my save button, And then now all I need to do is just refresh. There's two ways to refresh. I can refresh the individual window here by clicking on the blue menu bar and see the data populated. Or I could have come up to my top refresh button and refresh there as well. So now we see that I have entered in my pick list syntax on my rules page. It flowed through behind the scenes into my control cube, which is exactly what I wanted. Now let's go test this out. So now I just jump back to my asset input and I have to refresh. And I notice that I've got my pick list right here. So that's nice for my users. One more thing I wanted to show you with rules is, let me just go ahead and get out of here. I'm going to delete. I want to go and I'm going to duplicate. And I'm going to just put these side by side. One of the things that the QueBIT consultants love is that you can very easily swivel between two different instances. So let's say that you have at your organization a dev and prod, and you can come into here and you can choose, you know, two different instances, and you could, let's say that you had these rules were identical, let's just say. You can come in and you can basically edit and say, why is my dev working and my prod is broken? You know, and you could go line by line and look as a comparison. It's a very user-friendly layout. One final thing I wanted to teach you is about regions and rules. So we have the ability to collapse, and you notice that it's pound region and then end region. So this syntax, you can collapse all of your rules, and this is great. For those of you who have been writing rules, you notice that ultimately your eyes start crossing. So with this, you can kind of collapse everything up, and then you can expand, and you can then quickly jump to, let's say, a specific area and a specific rule within your rules file to then edit this code. If you wanted to add a new region, it's as simple as coming in, giving yourself some space, doing pound region, and then it's usually some sort of description. And then, you know, I'm just going to put a comment. And then you would just close it with the syntax end region. So that picks it up exactly, and you see I've got my new region within the rules here. Okay. So another great feature of PAW is how you can kind of collapse all this and very simply come in and just poke around in the section that you needed to come in and edit. All right, with that, I'm going to jump back into the PowerPoint. Let me go ahead and project. And we have one more slide. So Steve, why don't you lead us through the PAW cheat sheet for modelers here?
Thank you, Maria. So just a few tips and tricks to go through what we like to call our cheat sheet. The big thing that I personally run into is when I flip between edit mode for my testing. So sometimes I'll get hung up and something's not working the way I want it. Always have to check back to see if my pencil is activated and I'm in edit mode. Some of the other useful tricks. So when you're working in the rules, there's that FX button, and that's going to allow you to skip the step of opening up your Internet Explorer and browsing through the IBM Knowledge Center for the rules, definitions, and arguments. It's a big shortcut. It'll save you a lot of time and is very easy to use. Next, the blue box. So when you click on an object, any object, you'll see that blue box. When you click on that blue box, it'll give you your whole range of actions you can do to that. So that additional menu is good. It'll give you some guidance on what you can and cannot do to any given object. And then these three dots, when looking at rules, this will give you your shortcut keys, your line wrap, your change font, basically some good user features that will allow you to kind of work the way you want to work. And then once again, the duplicate button, this is a strong go-to for us developers. Basically, once you create something the way you want it, you can duplicate it, move it, place it. You can duplicate kind of like your base object, duplicate that and customize and build out certain things the way you want to do. So it's good to just keep these buttons in mind, because these are kind of core features that you're going to be using when developing either part of the model or part of kind of the dashboards.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So with that, that brings us to the conclusion of our time together for our second PAW training for modelers. I encourage everyone to please type in your questions into the GoToWebinar questions box. And I'm pulling it up right now, and I see that we have a lot of questions, not a lot of time left. So let's try and move through as many as possible. I'm not sure if we're going to get to everyone's. However, please write your questions if you have one. Steve and I will be sure to email you specifically back with an answer if we don't get to your question. So, okay, I'm just going to start at the top here. Are we able to use our rules worksheets in PAW? Okay, that's a good question. Unfortunately, IBM has stopped supporting rules and dimensions worksheets. They're considered deprecated features at this time. And so the only way to edit rules is truly in Architect or with PAW, as you just saw in these windows for my demo. And then, of course, once you save the rules in either Architect or PAW, those changes are instant. So as we kind of saw before with, adding elements, dimensions, and cubes, there's no lag time between the two. That's the same here with PAW rules and TI processes. So everything is pretty much instant. But to your question, unfortunately, rules worksheets are a deprecated feature along with dimension worksheets. So the best way forward is really to do rules editing in PAW or Architect. Okay, thanks for showing us about editing TI processes. In PAW, is there the ability to chore processes? Yes, there is. So I didn't do a demo on choring, but it is literally as simple as right-clicking on the word chore and then either running the chore or creating the chore, scheduling the chore, that sort of thing. So the chore process acts just like it does in Architect. You can turn them on and off from the PAW interface. It's the same functionality. There's no new anything to demo. It's just, the same. Here's a question about alternate hierarchies. Can the alternate hierarchy that you create in PAW be seen in Architect? Okay, that's a good question. No, it cannot. So this is one limitation from when you develop in PAW and then you're going back to Architect. Alternate hierarchies is something that is a feature that's only limited to PAW. And so if you create an alternate hierarchy in PAW, you will not be able to see or access it in Architect. And, for that reason, in my opinion, I think it's superior to develop in PAW now. So if your organization is one that would find alternate hierarchies useful, which I think many people might, if you start developing in PAW, that is really, I think, going to be the one-stop shop in the future. So alternate hierarchies to this time is only seen in PAW. I don't want to go into too much with alternate hierarchies. We could talk all day about them. I see another question here about what is alternate hierarchies. So QueBIT had about a year ago put out a wonderful video. It's called A Deep Dive into IBM PA Hierarchies. And that video is featured on our website. It's under our video catalog. I believe the quick link is simply QueBIT.com/video. And if you go to QueBIT.com/video, search for the word hierarchies, and that'll pull right up. That's an entire hour devoted exclusively to alternate hierarchies. Highly recommend everybody to go and check that out. Okay, We have more questions here. So what about security with the PAW dashboards and reports? How do I determine the access to these books? That's a great question. That is definitely an admin capability in PAW. So the admin capabilities are granting access and permissions to what I've built out today, the PAW dashboard, the reports, you know. And so we're going to talk about all of that in the next training in the series. So the next one is specifically for admin. It's going to be on May 19th, and up on the screen here, we do have QueBIT.com/events. That's where you can sign up. So if you are curious about PAW security, as well as, you know, what can a user do and not do compared to their TM1 security rights, as well as building out security admin type books in PAW, we're going to discuss all that in the third training. So be sure to sign up and join us for that. Okay, and I do see that we're just over time here. And so I'm going to do one more question here. Can you duplicate the rule window to show the same rule file twice? For example, if you wanted to look at the rule section and then the other window with the feeder section. Yes, you can. You could just use the toggle on the top to set it up so you're looking at the same instance with the same rule. To do the comparison between prod and developer, do they both need to be on the same server? No, they don't. So if you notice when I went to log into my TM1 Architect instance, for those of you who are eagle-eyed, you might notice I only had one instance running, whereas my PAW dashboard showed two instances running. I had a Welcome to QueBIT training instance as well as my CapEx. So locally, I was running my CapEx model, my TM1 instance, but then in the cloud, I have a QueBIT training environment. So the rules that you saw that I was looking at the QueBIT training environment, that was coming from the cloud, and then I was running locally CapEx. So if you have permission to seeing both of those instances, then you would be able to, you know, view the rules or whatever you had permission to in PAW. Of course, if you didn't have permissions, then I wouldn't have been able to see that. But both of those instances were in different environments. One was local and the other one was on the cloud. So you can absolutely compare, you know, prod and dev if they're not sitting on the same server. Okay. So with that, since we are over time, I'm going to just take a note of all these other questions, and we'll make sure to send you all an email with the answer. There's a lot of great questions here. We could keep talking for a while, but unfortunately we are out of time. So with that, I would like to thank you all for joining in today's PAW training session for modelers. Again, feel free, if you think of a question down the road, to email us. Myself or Steve are happy to always help. And with that, I hope everyone has a great day, and thank you all for attending.